Thank you, Yodi. Let's back it up. I was just affirming, just so glad to start off this session with something that a piece, Lil Nas X, that really speaks to the complexity, ambiguity, and what it means to lean into authenticity and not seek respectability, right? Not kowtow to those dominant narratives. So I just want to name that and hold a moment for that. Also, that I got my energy up. My name is Hamida Bhagarati. Really glad to be with you today. And I'll be sharing space with a few other folks. Deep Messman Johnson and Carly Frederick are going to be our triad of facilitators today. So welcome, welcome, welcome as you come and join us in this space, knowing that you might be coming from meetings, you might be taking care of little humans, and you're sort of transitioning and getting into a different headspace for centering justice. So let's all take a collective deep breath to transition into this space at a pace that feels good for you. So to also start us off, knowing that we are products of our ancestors, places and spaces, I join you from Ypsilanti on the stolen and occupied lands of the Anishinaabeg, Odawa, Potawatomi, the three council fires of Michigan, Sauk and Fox and Wyandotte, and land in which contemporary Indigenous peoples continue to live and thrive and contribute to our collective uplift. As a settler who's also experienced a double diaspora, from my Indian ancestors being transported to Trinidad and then my family migrating from Trinidad to the US, I acknowledge that I continue to benefit from this occupation. Words are not enough, but they can spur reflection and subsequently action. And I ask us all to take a moment to reflect on how our geographical past informs our present, especially in the ways when we think about what we're going to spend time talking and thinking about today, in which we create spaces in which we move beyond binaries to more generative selves. So let's take a moment. All right, y'all. So CJ, what we affectionately call CJ, Centering Justice, started out as a program at the beginning of the pandemic to amplify essential and powerful BIPOC voices to uplift the significance of communities of color and not only weathering the pandemic in light of all the capitalist and white supremacist movements that were only gaining momentum, but also dreaming about and helping build a more new and inclusive and equitable future. So it's dismantling and rebuilding at the same time. And we invite visionaries, storytellers, healers, folks who can really inspire us to interrupt the status quo and help us believe and think about and plan and take action towards a more just and thriving society. And I'm so excited to have Will, Ryan, and Jermaine, aka J Hero, with us today. So during our time together, I shared that Carly and I are going to be sort of very softly guiding this conversation, as I feel we have three powerhouses who really are able to deeply speak to this topic. So you might hear from one of us jumping in and maybe not, and we're going to go with it. We are so thankful to have Will Jones, pronoun he, him, and he's our communications and contributions director. Who is also an incredible saxophonist and also works with Black Men Read and volunteers for local dog rescue. Also with us, we have Ryan Henyard, he, him pronouns, who is a faculty experience designer at U of M Center for Academic Innovation, and who also serves as a trustee for Avalon Housing and works to reorient our community towards compassion. Ryan is also a Champions for Change Leaders of Color member, so super excited for that. And then we have Jermaine Dickerson, aka J Hero, pronouns he, him, who is the executive director of Hero Nation, And who really has an affinity for nerd culture and uses his superpowers for good through social impact work and community engagement, encouraging folks to discover the hero within them to live an empowered life. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm going to pass it on over to Yodi to do some grounding.
I'm all up in these chats, trying to send Ananya love messages, trying to check in with Nirja. Oh, and I just want Ryan, Will, and Jay Hero to know they've brought one of our larger audiences to the Centering Justice community today. All right, y'all. I feel giddy. Just because I got a little bit of a preview of what you have in front of you today in terms of a conversation. And this one is about nuance and complexity. And I feel like it's the conversation I need in this moment in my life. I am so much more. You are so much more than the world says you can or should be or are. I just needed to say that, and I want you to say that to yourself. I am so much more than the world says I am or can be. I'm unable to be who I was fully purposed and intended to be on this earth if I have to exist only in the constructed identities that this world has placed on me so that its systems can work. In order to see and to walk and to live in our full humanity, we gotta learn how to hold nuance and how to hold complexity and how to challenge these constructed, often binary definitions of who we are. In his book, The Naked Now, Richard Rohr, who is a Franciscan priest of the New Mexico province and also founder of the Center for Action and Contemplation, he wrote, "More than any other personality trait in my life, all or nothing thinking has caused me to make huge mistakes, bad judgments, to hurt people and myself, to withhold love and misinterpret situations. And this pattern of dualistic thinking is deeply entrenched in most Western peoples, despite its severe limitations. Binary thinking," Rohr writes, "is completely inadequate for the major questions and dilemmas of life. This system of either or choices that produced scientific and industrial revolutions for certain, many of which have served us well, but have also begun to show their severe limitations. And that mind, it cannot access eternal things. That binary mind is not the tree of life. It is only the tree of this or that." And Rohr asserts that people who have never loved nor suffered will normally try to control everything with this either or attitude or all or nothing thinking. We certainly have seen that in the last 20 months since Centering Justice started. And this closed system is all they're prepared for, which is why we have much of the chaos we do. That kind of mentality divides our world and centers those of us in the social sector in between the binary of deserving and undeserving. And by doing that, we never let go or never get near the experience of grace or mercy. This absence then leaves us judgmental, demanding, unforgiving, and weak in empathy or sympathy. Instead, we remain inside the prison of meritocracy, the thing that crushes us each and every day in its limitations, where all has to be deserved or earned instead of our birthright. Everything has to be loved, y'all, if we're interested in getting free from duality. That's from Lama Rod's Love and Rage. So today, I just want to invite you, and I'm here at this table too, to eat of the generosity, the courage, the vulnerability, and the expanse of these brothers. Let's be nourished. Carly?
Wow, that was really powerful. Thank you, Yodit and Tanita, for that opening. So we like to get into some introductions with our speakers, and we always want to invite our speakers to bring their full selves into this space. And so in that spirit, we'd like to ask each speaker to share the identities and communities that they're drawing upon as they enter this space. Will, would you be willing to start?
Yeah, it would be my pleasure. Everyone, can y'all hear me okay? All right, right on. Hey, folks, my name is Will Jones III. My pronouns are he, him, his. When I think about the identities and communities that I'm drawing upon for this conversation, I think it's like kind of, I don't know, it feels relevant to highlight some of the binaries in those, right? So I am the oldest son of an oldest son and youngest daughter, Marion and Foley. I am the product of both Black culture and predominantly white environments. So my family traces our lineage here back to 1619 and some of the first enslaved peoples to be brought to what became later the United States. And I spent the majority of my childhood and upbringing in predominantly white spaces, Birmingham, Michigan, and a little time overseas in Brussels and Waterloo, Belgium. You know, I identify as Black, cisgendered, heterosexual man. I am in a interracial relationship. I'm married to an incredible person who identifies as white, and she's on this call. What's up, Liz? And then I also identify as a Black creative and nerd, which I think is some of the stuff that really gets juxtaposed against itself. Or has been historically, and I'm super excited to be on a panel with a couple other brothers that I know hold some of those identities as well. So we're taking it back for the culture, y'all. Blurred power. And yeah, those are, I think, some of the things that are feeling. Oh, and I guess one more thing that feels particularly important, and I'll speak a little bit about this more. I'm the younger cousin to Will Cope IV. Who has been my lifelong role model. And I'll share a little bit more about our relationship as we kind of dive into some of this stuff about, you know, race and gender and all of this jazz, authenticity. So I appreciate y'all for giving me some space today. I'm excited to chat with you. I'll pass it over to Ryan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Henyard. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm really grateful to be here today. I identify as a gender non-conforming man, which is not the easiest thing to process all the time. But I think that is something that, you know, makes it, that is the most authentic, for lack of a better word, and the most true to the totality of who I am and who I've always been. I am a Detroit native, and that in that like has an impact on and an influence on everything that I do, everything that I've been, for good or ill. There's lots of positives and negatives that come from that association, a lot of traits and toughness and trauma that are all like woven up together, but deeply influence how I show up for people and how I seek to try to build community. I consider myself someone who is trying very, very hard to reorient everything in his life towards compassion, and trying to figure out ways to make grace for other folks. And in doing that work that I've always done and doing it in a way that is more honest with myself, it's been really learning about how I need to approach my own self and my own identity, how I think about myself, how I talk about myself, and better understand how to get myself free so that I can help free others. And I'm just really happy to be here with y'all today. This is like an amazing, for me, historic kind of thing to be on a panel like this.
All right, I guess I'm next. Hi, everyone. Good morning, or good afternoon, rather. I am J Hero. I pronounce like he, him, his. I identify as a cisgender, gay, Black man. My communities that I draw from, obviously, as I said, you know, gay and Black. Also, as Will said, creative and blurred, which are huge and essential characteristics for me because, as for those who know me, I'm a big superhero fan. And so I adamantly believe in the concept of heroism and really helping people discover the hero inside themselves. Because as we'll talk about later, a lot of this deconstruction and self-evaluation and transformation has to come from within you. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. And I'm excited to be here. So thank you.
So excited to hear more from all of you. So we are gathered here today to talk about authenticity, right? So what drew you here is, and I'll read our description to refresh us and ground us a little bit more. A culture of binaries can make it challenging to feel authentically ourselves. Yet all or nothing thinking rooted in white supremacy culture pervades our society and impacts our lives. What does it mean to shift away from binaries, especially at the intersections of gender and race? And how does living authentically change the ways we show up in our communities, our work, and I'll add ourselves? And I'll kick it off for our first question. And actually, with our first question, myself, Yodit, and Carly, we're going to sort of recede so we can uplift our three speakers. So Ryan, if you could start us off by sharing, how do you push against binaries, particularly in race and gender, and why?
Sure thing. I think that for me, the restrictions of the binaries make it very difficult to be able to enjoy the things that I want to enjoy without consequence. It historically in my life has made it difficult to say, want to explore all the different things that I'm interested in. For folks who, know me from certain spaces, they'll be surprised to know about other parts of me because I really feel like I thrive best when I'm doing a bit of everything. So I, spend time as a nature photographer. I'm currently working with the Washtenaw County Park System and doing, nature, wildlife and nature photography. The photos behind me are ones that I took at one of our nature preserves. I did not grow up seeing very many Black nature photographers or Black photographers outside of Gordon Parks, let alone someone in this naturalist wildlife space. And so it's constantly finding reasons to kind of hide those parts of yourself around people when you don't know how they'll react, or don't know how they'll look at look at you versus the stereotypes or structures in their head. It also shows up for me in terms of the things that I enjoy. And when I was younger, being the only masculine person in the poetry club, because even though I knew that there were lots of other boys who were writing poetry, none of them were willing to openly own that. Or recognizing that hey, loving really cute things and liking romances and all sorts of things that are coded as feminine makes my life so much better. That is the very personal way that I have been moving towards that. But honestly, for me, I feel like it started almost in reverse. It started for me as realizing and understanding all the ways that, in particular, white heteropatriarchy, made it really difficult for people in my life to live and thrive and to do the things they needed to do. I'm a firm believer that life is hard enough without needing to make it harder, by imposing some of these restrictions. And the older I got, the more I got a chance to see people, finding ways to express themselves, to own their interests, to own their experience and their identities. I just get really grateful thinking about the current generation of young folks who are growing up with new language and new discourse and new ways to think about themselves that are not lined up with the traditional pits of masculinity or femininity in the ways that we perceive them. And my development as a feminist led to me really recognizing all the ways in which patriarchal thinking, that binary thinking, made my life worse. And I realized that at some point I had to actually model the freedom that I wanted for other people, that I wanted to be able to own what it is that I enjoy in every space, that I needed to be able to be enthusiastic about all the things that I love, whether it's bubbly bubbly K-pop groups, or like really saccharine romance dramas, or all sorts of things. And instead of trying to redefine masculinity to envelope all of those things, to instead think about, well, what if I just redefine myself instead of trying to redefine how everyone else thinks about masculinity?
Yeah, that was a word right there, Ryan. I can like resonate with so much of that. I think particularly like the call to be a feminist and to really unpack that, like you were saying, like what is part of this masculine identity that I want to hold on to and what isn't. And like at the same time having to hold on to the responsibility that comes with the privilege of being male, right? Like in my body, but yeah, there's a lot of fear that I experience because I'm a Black person. But when I walk down the street, I don't have to worry about being accosted because I am a cisgendered male. Like that's not something. And so then, like you said, what does it mean to like model something different, right? And I think like, something that's coming up for me is just like reiterate, or maybe iterating for the first time here, that just because I'm on this panel to talk about living authentically and like exploring who I am outside of these binaries, like doesn't mean I haven't done harm, and it doesn't mean that I've always gotten it right. I have caused a lot of harm in my life to people who have more marginalized identities than myself, and it's part of the journey to like acknowledge and hope to repair that harm, right? But I think a huge part of doing that is, again, kind of like owning this, what does this maleness grant me? What does this masculinity grant me that I couldn't otherwise have, in order to help open something up for, like you said, the next generation. And I think that that's why like I'm so glad that we played Industry Baby at the beginning of this. Because Lil Nas X is definitely doing that, right? And I think, side note, Yodit and I have a podcast, Black Dandelion with Will and Yodit, where we talk about revolutionary Black music. So we're coming down off an episode where we just talked about Lil Nas X, and we're about to go into another episode talking, like there's a lot there. But like when we have these folks who are willing to stand in like the limelight and say, hey, like I'm gonna do something differently because this is who I am. Like what does that open up? What does that create for so many more of us? And then like what do we really have to lose there, right? That's a lot of like kind of what's rolling around, as we kind of think about the power and privilege that comes along with, what it means to be male and all of that goes with that.
Yeah, I want to say thank you to both of you for like those great insights. Just to add to that, in the whole spirit of authenticity, like you said, Ryan, it's being yourself it's about redefining yourself as opposed to redefining the world. But at the same time, we are sort of trying to combat, all these different systems of oppression to come up with to develop and to create a new and more liberated future. But that liberation, as I said earlier, has to start from within us. But that journey is so hard and it's so scary. And as I said yesterday, Will, even acknowledging that, yes, I've caused harm, I haven't always been perfect, even if it wasn't my intention, like that happens along the way. But, exercising self-accountability and being honest about, and asking the right questions, surrounding yourself with the right people. What does your community look like? Like for me, I think, one of the ways that I try to combat white supremacy and the patriarchy is just by simply existing. By simply existing in the way that as a Black gay man, but also by just trying to be an avid ally in the ways, once I acknowledge, say, I'm privileged, I'm also, while I'm also cisgendered, I'm also able-bodied, I'm also, while I'm not I'm also an American, which a lot of people, that's a privilege in a lot of ways as well. So there's so much, to unpack when it comes to these different identities. And it's really hard to sort of, because it's so convoluted, it's hard to break it off and to attack it piece by piece. It's nearly impossible because we're so into it. But through my art, I really try to convey stories and representations of empowered individuals, more specifically through the context of superheroes, because that's just my thing. And I believe that everyone has this inner child inside of them who longs to feel affirmed and to feel empowered. And I think that by you tending to that inner child and listening to the inner child, what does it need? What does it deserve? At the end of the day, everyone wants to feel validated and heard. No one wants to be silenced.
Right.
So how do we ask ourselves, in what ways, as you said, well, how am I, or you implied, how am I silencing someone? Again, going back to that self-reflection. And then just really looking into just the ways that I occupy different spaces. I remember I had, it kind of just came to me. I was at Quickalun's like a couple of years ago, and I remember, we were I mostly worked with all women, or it was like a group project, and it was all women on the group, and I had to ask myself, in what space, how do I navigate this space to ensure that my privilege is in check, so that making sure that everyone in this group has a voice. But then also, considering that most of them were white women, how do I, address that, that complexity as well. So there's so many different disparities and different ways to approach this. But I think, as I said earlier, at the end of the day, for everyone listening, you really have to sit down and ask yourself, like, what do I believe? Like, who am I? Like, if anything the pandemic has done for me, outside of stressing me the hell out, is, giving me an opportunity to deeply reflect on my values, and to, really think about my trauma and how did I get here? Am I living my best life? Am I showing up for myself and others in the best way? Because I want to do community work, but in order to do that successfully, I got to tend to myself. So I'm like, am I my best self right now? So ask yourself that question, and then go from there. And I think once you open yourself up to receiving that loving kindness from within, you'll be able to receive, you will be open to the learning process of transformation, of learning how to dismantle all the oppressive and internalized things that are inside of you. But like I said, it has to start from you.
Yeah, like I deeply resonate with that, and I honestly really thank you about calling out that that role that the pandemic has been kind of playing, and having a lot of time for us to be confronted and thinking about the truth of ourselves in this moment. I listened to an amazing discussion yesterday on one of the New York Times podcasts. It was Tressie McMillan Cotton, certified MacArthur genius now, always been a genius in the streets. Guest hosting for Ezra Klein's show and interviewing Kiese Lemon, whose book Heavy was a breathtakingly beautiful and heartbreaking memoir, and one of the things that I've seen written by a Black man that really dives into a lot of the areas of marginalization that like I've felt in my life, and seeing those spaces there, and the way that KSA talks about how he thinks about his life is all through the frame of writing, and he thinks about who he is now versus how he was before, or the arguments he's not willing to stand behind that he wrote years ago, as everything is an act of revision. And that's been sitting on my heart of I am still proud of the person that I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I'm exceedingly lucky, I think, to still feel that way, but I'm recognizing that the revised me, the current me, is the goal is for me to be more of myself than I've ever been, and that I know that it won't be perfect, and I know that, like Will said, I will still make mistakes in terms of not just interpersonally, in terms of how I relate to others, or harm that I may cause unintentionally. But I also have to kind of take ownership for harms I've caused myself. Like I've held a lot of expectations and expectations, and from community, from family, from friends, responsibilities that weren't always mine truly to hold. Um, it is really something to look at, difficult parts of your life and realize that you participated in making them more difficult because you were, because I was, for me, it was being really invested in performing, performing a version of myself that other people wanted to see. Whether that being a black person who wasn't threatening or scary in the workplace. I am a very, large man. I am a 6'3", 300 plus pound, proud black man. I am large and often feared that like I am seen as intimidating or threatening. And so, how much of my over the top friendliness came from this is just how I relate to people versus how much of it is this is a defense mechanism I adapted to not get killed in a world, full of Emmett Tills. Like I still don't know. I'm
Stop,
still learning.
stop.
Oh, go ahead.
Woo!
Whew.
Honey, that was a word. How much of this is so I can survive in a world of Emmett Tills, honey?
I really think about that. I think that last year I made a course with U of M on police brutality in America. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of my entire life of making. And it was one of the most difficult things I've ever made in my life. And the difficulty was because of the fear of getting it wrong. Like that kind of pressure of feeling like you need to be so many things to so many people. Will and Jay and I have talked about the ways that we are hoping this next generation has expanded possibilities and how that shows up in all of our community work for all three of us. Um, and a good chunk of that is me looking back and going, my parents are in their 70s. Um, my parents did not grow up with voting rights. Coming from Natchez, Mississippi, and Little Rock, Arkansas, Mariana, Arkansas. I'll be specific. I know that my Arkansans will appreciate that. And recognizing that, like, even though there are things in those binaries that they attached to my sister and I, that made our own, upbringings difficult. What they were trying to do was expand the possibilities for our world in all the different ways, economically and, career wise, financially, being able to do and experience the things that we've experienced is, direct result of that intentionality in trying to prepare us for that. In that same way, I think that this is the current fight for our generation, is to expand as much as possible beyond the binaries of instead of looking at the terms of the binaries of like who has rights in this country, which debatable whether we've accomplished that. But how do we expand beyond this next generation feeling like they need to hew deeply into what we say a man or a woman is, or what we say a black person is, because I think that life is too hard. There's too many challenges we have to face to be also spending so much of our energy, so much of our identity formation, our meaning making on figuring out how to deal with these bogus binaries that we know don't serve us well.
Bro, like coming back to that Emmett Till line, right? I mean, so much of what you have said now is just like, our ancestors' wildest dreams, right? I think a lot of the time when we're talking about justice and the movement for justice, like there's a lot of conversation about, oh, you all are our ancestors' wildest dreams come true. And at the same time, I'm like, I feel like my ancestors' wildest dreams, like, is one of liberation. And that doesn't necessarily, like, that doesn't mean just like, oh, I'm not chained to, my brothers and sisters picking cotton, or I'm out here able to like do the job that I want to have. But it really is that like I can be kind of like period, right? And what would it look like if we didn't have to think about that dark street dilemma, right? Like like, sorry, for like when when a Black man is on the street alone with a woman, right, there is often the like fear that's running both ways. I think the fear of like, oh, what is this person, what is this person and their body and power going to do to me? And then on the other end for us, like, am I going to be perceived as a threat just because I'm standing here on this street? Look, I can't tell you how many different Black men I've had the conversation of like, what do you whistle when you're doing that? What is the sign that you outwardly have to make that you're not a threat? So I know grown ass men who learn the theme to Frozen, like Let It Go, so that they can sing that on the street when they're alone, regardless of what's in their headphones, so that the other person knows that they're not a problem, right? Like you were saying, Ryan, what does a world where we don't have to put ourselves into and contort ourselves and come up with these extra little pieces of ourselves look like to survive, right? And I can imagine that there are people on this call for whom there is they have an identity that they are like, oh yeah, what if I didn't have to do that to just be? And that, I think, comes kind of back to like this thing about the right people for me that Jay was talking about. Like, who is like, we've all talked about like, oh, we want a model, right? And I think about like, that's only kind of possible for me because of the models and the role, like the people in my life who are willing to get up and just be themselves. And I mentioned earlier, I am like the younger cousin of Will Cope the Fourth. This dude is badass. Podcaster, designer, creative extraordinaire, also, identifies as a Black gay man. And that was the person for me, like my whole life, who was the coolest dude. Like, that's who I was trying to emulate. So I grew up in these white environments, right, where I'm not seeing a lot of other Black men at all, certainly not many that are older than me. And then I get to go spend time, right, with my family for the holidays. And here I have this dude who's got all the sauce, all the swag. He knows like the coolest video games. He's got the coolest clothes. He also plays with Barbies. He also has like a book of sketches of different dress designs that he's working on. And, I can distinctly remember going to one of his dance recitals, right, as a kid, and watching all those, like predominantly women, but a couple boys up there too, like getting down and thinking to myself, like, man, that is so cool, right? All it takes is just like one person, I think, in our lives, at least it was for me, that was like, this is who I am. And that's like, that's it, period. Like, this is who I am. In order to kind of like break that open, right? And I, fanboy out a little bit to myself, right? I think that Ryan Henyard and Jay Hero are even two of those folks for me, even like, we're peers. But when I see Ryan get up on Facebook rocking his pink nails for, October breast cancer awareness, like, that is a step. When I see Jay Hero shirt off, whipping that body, dancing, come on, bro, you get down. Like, then that's the same energy that I take. Look, you can ask my boy Mobo. I'm taking that same flavor to the spotlight, hitting it. We're getting on the dance floor. We're going to move, because I know that there are other dudes out here who are willing to do that and put themselves. And now I have that opened up for me. So I appreciate y'all, even just for being some of those right people in this space and in my life. Shit.
Yeah, thank you so much, Will. That gave me a good laugh. I mean, to that point, like, I gotta say, like, all my life I've been an artist or creative in some way, anyway, different ways, shape, or form. Starting with music and drawing, and then with dance, and vocal singing. I've done a lot, when it comes to exploring my identity. I'm just an artist through and through. That's just in my DNA. As I was saying earlier, as an artist, I feel a responsibility to, to myself, to the inner child, first and foremost, to tell these stories that honor the person or the world that I want to see. And so that's why you see, as I draw a lot of Black characters, or I rarely draw white characters. And not because, it's not, and it's just because that's what I wanted to do. It's not something that I innately think about. It just happens, that's what I feel. And I always draw what I feel. And so I think, I remember when I came out, and publicly back in 2016, I made a post on Facebook, and it was during the Orlando shooting, which was a very tragic event, and I felt, triggered, and I felt in some ways just alone in that way. And I said to myself, I'm sure there's someone else who probably feels the same way, who may feel worse. So what can I do to hopefully help inspire, share some hope during this time? But then a lot of people are feeling emotions. And so I decided, I said, I want to come out. So let this be a time for me to take a step out on faith and to make my voice be heard. And I got a lot of support, and and of course there were some, issues with, certain people or whatever, but it made me feel great that I at least could take that step to be my authentic self. And even like you said, well, with my dance videos, the reason I even post, videos like that is because it just seeing Black joy,
bro.
it intimidates people, period. I could post a picture of a little Black girl smiling in a mostly white Facebook group. I'm sure I'll get a lot of flack. And it's just the simple existence of seeing Black people being liberated or experiencing joy tends to trigger people. And I don't do things to trigger people. That's exhausting. That's not none of my business. You need to figure it out yourself. I do things because I want to exist and live a liberated life. It's not my responsibility to teach you how to unlearn your oppressive behaviors. But if you are triggered by just seeing me exist, maybe you might want to evaluate, going back to that self-reflection earlier, that there is something in you that needs to be addressed. And I'm not saying I'm absolved from oppressive thinking, because there's a lot of unlearning that I'm doing. There's a lot of unlearning and learning at the same time that I'm doing. And I'm so thankful for the knowledge that I've acquired over time, and the community that I've surrounded myself with, which includes, for example, trans Black women, which includes non-binary people, which includes all kinds of individuals who occupy different identities and spaces. And although sometimes it is, challenging to understand someone else's lived experience, I think the first step is being open to that, and receiving, their lived experience, and and it's interesting because there are a lot of people who are so dismissive when someone says for example, let's talk about bisexuality, for example. Even within the LGBTQ A+ community, there's erasure of bisexual people, there's erasure of trans people. There's so much, even just because you occupy a marginalized identity does not mean you cannot be an oppressor. So, with that in mind, and I think that's what a lot of people, especially when it comes to white people, there's, or specifically white women, and having that conversation about, having privilege, but also being marginalized in that way. How do we, as you said earlier, having that conversation about, if I'm seeing a white woman walking down the street, which I have had this experience, I would go to the other side of the streets. I don't want to feel like I'm making her uncomfortable. Or I remember I had, a white lady pat me on the head, because she wanted to touch my hair. She did not ask for my consent, but she did it anyway. And this was, someone that I knew. And so, just that idea that, some people think they have access to your space, or they have access to you just simply because they, that's where that privilege comes into play. Because you have that privilege, you think you have that power to invade people's spaces. But, before you make that decision, again, asking yourself, where am I coming from with this? So all that to say, I think, it's scary, going on this journey. It's hard. There are blood, sweat, and tears involved. And sometimes, when you are liberating yourself, you want to help liberate others around you, especially your family and friends. And sometimes, they're not always receptive. And that's another struggle too, because you want your community, those you love most, to be on your side as well, and through and through. But yeah.
No, yeah, I thank you for that, because like I think that something that I've been struggling with in a number of different ways, and actually like in my activist work, in my like in like not only just around like gender and race, but also like just in terms of like the world that I am fighting to build is one that it is not popular. Like it's not necessarily the most popular thing in the world to say like I am working and building towards a future that doesn't involve police. It's the thing that is very different from how people can imagine things. Um, and in the same way, I think that there's a lot of fear that motivates some of the behavior that we're talking about. And like it has consequences. Like the number of trans and non-binary kids who attempt suicide before 18 is ridiculously high. It's in the 30s to 50%. Um, and so much of that is around the lack of acceptance, the lack of acknowledgement of their selves, and feeling like that there is no place where or no option to be able to be who they are. um, I think about the number of specifically Black trans women who've been murdered in the past few years, and I think about um, how like this is not an academic conversation,
Right.
the way that it often is described in my university, in other institutions, in public debates and discussions about like how they've turned wokeness into a dirty word, or all sorts of things like that. Like it's people's lives, and for me, that gives me courage when I don't want to have it, um, because I don't think of myself as a particularly courageous person. I think about myself as a deeply anxious person, and someone who's always afraid of how people will relate to me, will change how they see me, will change who I'm able to impact or uplift. But in recognizing that there's an old quote from Ta-Nehisi Coates before he made it big, when he was still just blogging. He said like a boot on the neck ennobles no man. And just because you are oppressed in one sphere of your life or one marginalized identity doesn't mean that you don't have the capacity to harm other people. um, and so like being truly dedicated through like, because my politics is a politics of love and a politics of urgency, that means that I have to be willing to do what it takes to provide for everyone I see as in community with me the ability to live that way. Um, and for me, it's forced me to reckon with who I am in a way that is not something that I had the courage to do beforehand. So I know that it's not like it's not easy to do this stuff. It can be really difficult to look at this and say like, I'm going to accept that internally, even internally with no one else around. you know I think I spent maybe a year or two thinking about that gender non-conforming tag, and how I felt about it, because it was just like, this is just going to cause problems. There's nothing positive that's going to come out of this for me at all. But still feeling eventually that like I needed to accept it about myself, and then begin to reorder and revise the story I tell about myself. um I think that so much of us need the space, not just to do these things for us or the next generation, or but also to like just to build community with each other, because it's really hard to say, I love you, I care about you, I want you to succeed in this world, I want you to have the things you need for a life, and not be willing to actually dive into the methods of oppression that are keeping them from having it. Or I can't say these things and recognize like, oh, well, I'm not going to deal with the division of household labor and how that impacts your ability to show up in the professional space. Like that's not my part of the concern. No, it doesn't work like that. Like it's all interconnected, we are all interwoven with each other. And accepting that and really believing it means that I have to continue to try to remake myself into a version of me that fits those needs, and that is as true to myself as possible. And it's terrifying, but I'm glad that like y'all are also going through it together. I feel so much less alone.
Yeah. Oh no, it definitely is. Like I think it needs to be said that there still is so much phobia in dominant culture and also in Black culture, right? And And that is really unfortunate because it's not, it was like, that wasn't ours. You know, like if you look at the continent, the African continent, you will find every kind of way of living, every kind of way of loving. There are peoples who have been, you know, doing things for millennia that are outside of these binaries, and have been outside of these constructs of like class and gender and all of this shit that we have inherited through, right, colonialism and through, you know, like being here in America. So I think it's like talking about that unlearning, you know, like you both have brought up, right? It's almost like a reconnecting too with like, who is our real authentic self? Coming back to that, like my ancestors' wildest dream is not that I am a macho man who, you know, I don't know, oppresses my wife and kids, and, you know, makes all the people that work with me feel like I'm in charge and they have to like kowtow just to get heard. Like, nah, that, I don't think that that's what my ancestors wanted for me at all. I think that what they wanted was for me to have a life of love and joy, right? And that they want the same thing for everyone else too. So really like breaking that apart. And I think, again, that's why it's so important for those of us who do have particularly like the body privilege, right? You know, when we're out in the world, to model different ways, because like you said, you know, there is so much hurt and harm, and there is so much of this that is really like our internalized pain, right? To Jay's point of like, we have to really like do that, get in touch with ourselves and ask like, who do I want to be? And like, I think often the question that I'm finding myself asking is, you know, do I want the people around me to experience the same pain that I have because of having to be boxed in? Or do I want to live in a way that continues to open that up so that they can, you know, like really be themselves and feel loved and valued and seen? I don't think
only binary worth like lifting up this week is that binary of like, you know, do you do it to other people because it happened to you, or
right.
are you making sure that it never happens to anyone else again?
Right. Like
Right.
that's the world that I'm trying to live in, is the one where, you know, everyone is a J hero, right? Because they are able to be themselves and uplift the other people around them. Like that's what I'm about for sure. And like having the courage to do it, having the courage to like be ourselves, I think it really does, like you were saying, come down to community, right? And while there has been so much that has been polarizing and so much that has been isolating and alienating because of COVID, one of the things that I've found has been like comfort in community online, right? Just finding these little pockets of people who I didn't know existed before, because I, you know, okay, like I'm by myself, you know, so what am I going to do? All right, I'll try to figure it out. So yes, my blurred community, there are some folks who will recognize I am wearing an anime shirt right now, right? And I feel comfortable doing that because I know that there are other Black nerds out there that are like, oh yeah, that's what's up, Shokugeki all day, like Ryan, who hit me in the chat with that. And also, you know, like that, it spills out. It spills out one person to the next.
Hold on, side note, I gotta say, who's this person? Console, is someone, I'm sorry, someone has like this, it's a Puerto Rican superhero in their background, and I'm here for it. I'm sorry, I guess got sidetracked looking at someone's background. Yes, to that point, Will, courage, I think that's the key word here. Wait, can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Uh-oh. Okay, cool. But to that point, like I was thinking about that word too, courage. Like it takes so much courage to do all of this work. And like I've just now come to this journey where I am doing both the light work and also the shadow work as well. And I think that's what I would encourage a lot of people to do. I know, we want to do the feel good stuff, things that make us feel great about ourselves. And of course we want to pour and lean more into that. But I think, as I said earlier, just to have a sense of urgency to really do that shadow work, like to face your demons, to face the darkness inside of you, because we all have it. We all have it, to face the voices that are encouraging you or inspiring you to challenge your convictions, and to really, so that at the end of the day, you can learn how to give more love, honest and radical love to yourself. Because I think it's so important to, as you said, Ryan, this is all stemming from a place of love, a love of humanity, love of people, love of life, a love of just of being, as you said, Will. You just want to be. And I think just having that, making that room and space for yourself to do all of that, in addition to, as I said earlier, surrounding yourself with the right communities is super important. But I forgot to mention it earlier, going back to the rapid deaths of Black trans women, especially, that is a crisis. Like even learning things like that, in the ways that I, as a cisgender a Black man, how do I, occupy those spaces? And for those who are Black and trans, how do I, am I using the right terminology? Am I still properly identifying someone, even though I'm not in front of them? So making sure to always practice, those that inclusive language. And also I want to make the point too, intersectionality, which is a term coined by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, which is a key point to all of this. Like we all, the whole idea of occupying multiple identities and being able to be marginalized and oppressed at the same time, like it's super important. But I think, the key here is, just asking yourself, again, those right questions and having the courage to face your demons, because sometimes the demons, sometimes are your family members too. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's people in your lives. And so who may have instilled those beliefs in you. So for example, you grew up in a white household that was racist, and you may have some of those beliefs in yourself, but you are challenging them now. You have to challenge that within yourself. But then, once you're ready, I urge you to challenge your family members as well. But as I said, it has to start from you.
I think sorry, Ryan, just to cut in real quick, Jay, I think you uplifted something really important there about like it is a process, right? And it's like baby steps. Because to the points that you and Ryan have both made, like there is danger out there, right? When for us to rebuke the confines of these binaries that white supremacy has put down, and white supremacy and patriarchy have put down on top of us, right? Like there is some danger there. And I don't think that any one of us is necessarily like out here advocating, like, put yourself like in harm's way to be authentic, but to take the steps that you can where you can, right? So like it may be safe for you to dress differently when you're at home, right? It may be a safe thing, guys, to like put on a skirt when you're at the house, right? And you have that space and get comfortable and feel okay in that there, or, to folks who are on the other side of that binary, to dress more masculinely, whatever it is that you're trying to do, right? Like just, be mindful and live into that with like a little bit of intention, and find the people that like you can definitely trust, right, to hold that with you. Because there still is quite a bit of harm that folks can do out here.
Can I ask about that, y'all? You've each alluded to the spaces where you can sort of live in your expanse, right? But I'd love, Will, you mentioned like maybe we're experimenting in our intimate spaces, right? With these expanding definitions of who we are and how we identify and how we want to express ourselves. You and I with the podcast, right, really focused on what it feels like to be Black bodied in a majority white community where we don't see or experience often the affirmation of our identities, right? And so Black Dandelion is about taking up space. It's also, it calls upon the blueprint that we have from the ancestors, right? Pre-colonial blueprint of music and the drum beat, right, as a central tenet of our freedom and liberation. And so I'm curious about, where are the spaces where you can fully be you, right? And where the expanse of you can exist. What does that look like for you? Ryan, I'll start with you, and maybe then Jay and Will.
Sure. I mean, for me, it's interesting because I think that, in my own home is the place that I needed to build that out. Build that out first. I am extraordinarily lucky to be married to an incredible woman who has been, we've been married for 11 years now. And again, and the things that you talk about when you talk about, how did I not understand this about myself earlier kind of things. When I described our relationship very early on to people, I would go like, we work super well because we don't have to perform traditional gender roles for each other. We're able to be ourselves and who we need each other to be. We are truly partners in that way. And I can say this without getting like super mushy because I know that she dropped off the call early. So hey, honey. But but that gives me the ability to like the safety, the safety to know that as I figure out more about myself and lean into who I want myself to be, that I don't have to worry about losing something so important to me because I know that because that support is there and has been there, regardless of of how these things change or how they might change, because recognizing that in the same way that I the revised me now versus the revised me in 5 years, what will I be aiming to do. I think that one of the other things for me is I it's been trying to carve out spaces in different places where I'm at where I do have that safety, knowing that I can't impose it everywhere. So doing DEI work, diversity, equity, inclusion work, like is something that I did in part because as a protective thing of like I want to protect my community in this workspace. But also it's to ensure that there is at least one space, one one reservoir of psychological safety for me in that workplace where I can truly be myself. Right now it shows up like digitally on, like me being able to be myself on Twitter or Instagram and like geek out about everything from like ragdoll cats, like my gorgeous ragdoll cat, or or Japanese music, or looking or playing fighting games with friends, or having deep discussions about gender and abolition. Like the multiplicity of it all, like being able to be all the different kinds of things that I am without having to compromise is the truth of it. I think that like for me, the second I'm not pretending that I don't have this wide variety of other skills and interests, and that I'm only actually interested in this thing. Like, and I'm a giant sports fan, so like I can sit and talk to somebody about the Pistons and whether Cade Cunningham is going to put it together, early for a long time. But in the past, I would have not talked about. Oh yes, I did that, and also. You really got to check out this. You really have to check out this Jasmine Guillory romance book. It's really dope. But being able to hold all those ideas at once and to be able to hold them publicly is me trying to at least make a bubble of space around myself. I don't know whether I'm going to be good in every room. I think I've given up on the idea of feeling like I need that to be that way. My goal is to be okay with myself wherever I go. Jay, I'm curious about you, about like how you find community in these spaces, because I know that it's different for like it's especially different in terms of like communities built around built around like gender sexuality. Like I'm still finding my way through queer communities and like where it makes sense to feel like I'm not intruding versus places where I'm actually welcomed. So I'm curious about about you, about where are these spaces where you find yourself free to be.
Oh man, well, like you said, home You know, your home has to be your safe space, your sanctuary. And then also, you know, I try to make my space, you know, carve out my space on social media, you know, like Instagram or it used to be Twitter before. I took down my account because of DMCA claims, whatever. It's interesting because at that time
Haters.
I had, what'd you say?
I said haters.
I know, right? Oh, goodness. But at that time, you know, I had around, I had a good following, you know, I had a really good following. I had a great community there. And it was awesome to be around so many supportive people. And I credit a lot of my learning and unlearning to the scholars and to the lived experiences I've observed on Twitter. Because if I didn't, you know, a lot of things I didn't know about, you know, I just didn't know. And so, but listening to different people's perspectives, and that's one of the joys of social media, although we can talk about how toxic it can be, but one of the joys is that it connects you to people with different experiences and you're able to build that community. Like I've been able to find friends on the social media who I've built communities with, who are still my friends, you know, in real life, you know, today. But also just, yeah, it's really about, you know, as you said, you know, Ryan, you want to be your authentic self in whatever space you're in, but it's sometimes, at least for me, that is something that I'm still working on. It's a work in progress because, you know, there are some times where I feel like I want to shrink myself, or maybe my light is too bright, or maybe I don't want to come off as intimidating, or, you know, to this person who may see my Blackness and my maleness as scary. But in what ways, you know, and I'm continuing to give myself permission to live in that way, to live my truest self, basking in my light. And I think, you know, that is at the end of the day, you know, what allows me to be in these spaces and to create spaces where I do feel safe. I just, you know, I have to give myself permission to feel safe in this space, you know, and also create a space where I do feel resolved and I feel at peace, you know, because at home, like I can, just to be honest with you, or to be completely transparent, I struggle with depression very heavily. And like, look at my house right now, it's a mess. I got clothes everywhere, I need to clean up. It's been hard. And if I'm being real, it's, you know, one of those things where it's like, you know, how do I pour into myself during these times where I need a hug, you know, or where I need support? Because, you know, when we talk about mental health, and especially with Black men, the Black community, that's another subject altogether. But, you know, realizing that, you know, I'm in control. Well, I cannot control my emotions, or I can't control other people's, you know, their responses. I can control how I react to things. And so just giving myself permission and just really leaning more so into my agency has inspired me to continue to take up space, has inspired me to continue to seek out spaces where I do feel affirmed and safe. And spaces that challenge me. You know, I don't want to just be in a space where everyone is agreeing with everything I'm saying, or everyone's on the same page. You're not learning anything there. You're not growing. So what, you know, so that's, you know, that again, it's about intentionality, you know, and that goes, you're able to get to that point once you continue to ask yourself, who am I? You know, that goes back to my point earlier about your values and understanding who you are. But once you get to that point, you're able to say, okay, how do I get there? This is what I need. This is who I need support from. This is what I need to do. So it's kind of like you're strategizing on how you can be your best self. Because but it's, again, you have to be honest in your self-reflection.
You know, I think that answer the same question. I also have found like a lot of, like I said earlier, kind of comfort in groups online, just connected, you know, like what Jay was sharing. I get an abundance of inspiration, particularly from like Black creatives and nerds, like the folks who decide, oh, you know what, I'm going to take Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and splice them with the Power Rangers, create my own new characters, and this is what it is, you know, or for all the, I think a lot of the Black nerds are going to know like hey, she gonna be Black Like Today song, right? Because there is something again about us like taking up space and just being us authentically, and that we can find that community online, I think has been a really powerful, beautiful thing. I think the other place that I feel like I can be completely myself is like on canvas, if I'm painting, or on paper if I'm writing, if I like when I'm playing my horn. I don't do a lot of like writing music. I play a lot of improv. And so just more often than not, what you're hearing is just kind of like literally what's coming into my head in that moment and just coming out. And then finally the dance floor. If there's anybody who wants to like boogie, like hit me up, because I'm always down to get out there and move my body. And that is just a way that, you know, I can kind of sit, like I can dive into another universe in music and sound. And then it's just, you know, us and the beat, getting back to the ancestors, right? All in the drum. And that, yeah, just, it makes me feel like both alive and free when I'm just, you know, moving to the tunes. So if you were like that, yo, hit me up. Like we can go out. Let's do it. I'm down.
Can I just say real quick that I just want to like the creative part, yes, to that too. But I find myself in my art and, you know, being able to like, again, having the gifts of creation, whether it be through music or through just visual art, or even through dance, to create something from nothing. It's truly just, I'm realizing how powerful that is and how much, you know, you're able, and how you're able to really influence and even inspire people through your works of art. Because we have art that's been around for centuries that are still moving and inspiring people. And I'm amazed to see, you know, now, you know, that what these times have inspired and the voices and stories have inspired from the challenges that people have been facing. And I think although when we are in challenging times, of course, you know, it's hard, it's difficult, but out of those times always comes a lot of, well, it's just to sound cliche, out of dark times always comes heroes, or comes, you know, people who are living or finding new versions of themselves, who are say, hey, I got through this. I can do, what else can I do? You know, and so you're coming into yourself to say, hey, I am, you know, I'm amazing. And so getting to that point is, you know, it's super hard, but I think it's so worthwhile.
I just hope for us to sit in that for a moment. And I see the chat is popping off in the most beautiful way. Thank you all so much. I feel like time has flown by, it's run away. I'd love for us to shift. And I feel like you've already started talking about this. What are your demands, invitations, asks for us? I feel like this has been a long love letter with asks sprinkled in. But what do you hope that we emerge with today? What is our action plan?
I think for me, I can say that as you're on your journey of growth, to continue to operate from a space of love, because it can be easy to get so self-critical. Why didn't I think of this? Why am I not like this? You know, why didn't I know this already? I should have did this, should have did that. You know, if you are, you know, expressing yourself, or, you know, talking to yourself from a place of love and kindness, you know, asking yourself, what does a voice in my head sound like? Is it hypercritical? Is it, you know, maybe start there. Go to therapy, get help to help you unpack all of this, because you cannot do it alone. So rely on your counselors. Even I would encourage, if you're a spiritual person, get you know, go to therapy, and also get spiritual support. You know, if you want to do that as well, you know, just rely on, you know, on those systems to help you get through that. But just again, just taking that step to have the courage to say, I'm ready, you know, in order to say yes to growth. It's a big thing. So, but yeah, just be kind to yourself throughout the process. Continue to be an active listener. Listen from a place of compassion and empathy and understanding. And I know some of you who are here today are already doing that. That's amazing. That's the first step. and just to continue to try to be the best version of yourself, and never shrink yourself for anyone. And yeah, just live your best life, but at the same time, making sure that you can help others live their best life too, and making sure that as you are coming into your own life, that you're not dimming out someone else's, because we should all be coming up together, honestly. So yeah.
I can go next. There's some words written on my heart, spoken by the illustrious Dr. Eve Ewing, poet, writer, professor, comic book author, does all sorts of things in all sorts of spaces, playwright, visual artist, who models a lot of the kind of authenticity that I aspire to. One of those people you look up to who are, just even though they're younger than you. Um, um, and there was a talk at one of her book talks early on I went to, and she gave me language to describe how it is I try to show up for people. And it was, and this is a loose quote because wasn't recorded, and there's no, no evidence of this other than my presence there. But she said that she believed in a Baldwinian sense of love, as in like a James Baldwin sense of love. James Baldwin called us to criticize the things that we love, because we love them, not because we are looking to looking to harm them. And that her sense of urgency in all of her work, all of her creativity, all of her community work is based off of that radical love. And it's some of one of the first times I heard a phrase that actually described my alignment towards other people and community. And I think that is really important for those of us who see ourselves as motivated to change this world for the better, to be doing so from a place of love and recognizing the difficult decisions that can have us make. It means standing up for things when they're difficult. It means sometimes giving away power, like actually giving away power. And I repeated that partly because it's a thing that I think we often go, okay, well, I'll give away this little bit, but no, it's really relinquishing, and stepping back and realizing, what is yours to be taken from the space, and what needs to be shared or spread, what needs to be cultivated and grown. How do you do that, for other people? And I think that, there's nothing, Miriam Kaba, abolitionist, fave of mine, said that there's nothing worth doing, that's not worth doing with others. And this liberation doesn't have to be a solo project. It's going to be really hard if it is a solo project. I think that, we're all tied up with each other. You're able to, no matter where you are in your journey, there are other people in your lives who are going through this right now together. Even as people grow at different rates, there are others who are all, going to be able to match your pace. Like, you have to find and build and protect community, in all the ways that means. And I earnestly believe that so many things that we struggle with in terms of community, in terms of getting people to care about each other, only get fixed if there's not just one big network of people saying, this is, here's all the good people and here's all the things they're doing right. It's a multitude, a network, a constellation of different communities that are all figuring out ways to be better to each other and to themselves. And so figuring out where you are in that, like in that constellation, which star you are, is not easy, but it's something that's worth doing. And it's worth finding others to go on that journey with you. And there's lots of people who've already, walked some of those paths. And there's people you can learn from, elders in, queer communities, elders in black and BIPOC communities, who can share things that they've been through so that you don't have to, do it all yourself. And look forward to the next generation and figure out, like, what are you doing to build the path to more authenticity for the folks coming after you. Like, for me, it's difficult to look at things and say, I don't expect to see all of these things happen in my lifetime. And some folks can look at that and go, like, well, yeah, well, then why should I spend all this energy for it? But that next generation is a easy reason to say, like, I understand where I am in this chain, that this unbroken chain of people trying to make life better, doesn't end with me, that I am going to keep on making that space for others. That's worthy work. It is worthy of your time and energy and your heart and faith. And it's also worth extending that to yourself. That last part is what I'm working on right now. But I am saying it in terms of like setting up my own accountability to show up for myself the way that I'm showing up for others.
Man, how to follow these two phenomenal gentlemen. I just have, like, I guess, a couple of demands. And my first demand is I want y'all to reflect on what has been my mantra this year, which is like, what is the future that I want to see, right? And are you actively trying to create the world that you hope for tomorrow? Because, I think that really informs the way that we like treat each other, right? So tomorrow I want to live in a world where like men and women and non-binary people can all live as they are, as who they want to be, and feel loved and valued in that space. So that's what I'm going to try and do is continue to put that out into the world. And I encourage y'all to think about that a little bit too. The second thing, please support organizations that are specifically out here trying to help our youth, particularly our youth of color, and particularly our marginalized youths. So I can think of like Ozone House and Ypsilanti is a great resource for the community's youth. Please donate to them and get engaged and involved with their work. And similarly, for those of us who are out here in Wayne County, the Ruth Ellis Center is a phenomenal resource for, I think that Ryan and Jay really uplifted like our LGBTQIA youth of color are extremely vulnerable population. They really need the support and love of our community. And so let's make sure that we're showing up for them. And then selfishly, please dive into revolutionary works of art by people of color. And one resource that you can use to do that is by joining Yodit and I for Black Dandelion. Dropped the link in the chat there. We have a good time talking about revolutionary Black music, and much of the work, the artists that we're talking about are really like occupying these intersections and really elevating like their authentic lives and the work that the experiences that go into making that art. So yeah, come hang with us. But otherwise, if you need a list, you can always reach out, and I'm happy to share some of the music and film and television that has been inspiring me over the past, forever. So thank y'all very much for the time.
Thank you, Jay Hero, Ryan, Will. I know I'm gonna have to take a moment and then rewatch. So thankful we've recorded this. I think about what it means to really think about ourselves and take stock. And Ryan, you were saying show up for ourselves. I was writing down a few conversation gems and wisdom that was coming up. And I'll close with this, and then there'll be some logistics at the end. But for y'all, what do you believe? Who are you? What are your truths? In a world of Emmett Tills, what parts of your personality were responses to protect yourselves? What do you whistle in the streets? What do you want to do with that? Life is hard enough without needing to make it harder by squeezing into bogus binaries. What are new ways to think about yourself that don't use masculinity or femininity as the guidelines for who you are and who you might be? Be proud of your unpopular opinions. Cause problems. It can be terrifying, and we're terrified together. Find your people, be courageous. The only binary worth upholding, are you perpetuating abuse or challenging it? This is not an academic conversation. There is danger, so make waves where you can when you're safe to make them, and find your people. Criticize the things you love because you love them. Flowers can only grow by pushing through the dirt. Face both your light and your shadow selves. Part of this process is healing the harm done to those in your communities and yourself. Be accountable to yourself, those you love, and those that will come. Only operate from a place of self-love. What really are our ancestors' wildest dreams? Experience, uplift, and support Black joy. Model something different with yourself, with those you love, and those that will come. Being with people who love us for who we are can help us be and become who we are. Seek out your inner child. What does it long for? What does it dream of? How can you lovingly care for it? Everything is an act of revision. Who is the revised you? How can you be more of yourself than you've ever been before? Go to spaces where you can be you. Show up for yourself. Draw the world and future you want to see. Your light isn't too bright. It's just right. Who are you? Be that. Thank you so much for joining us today for Centering Justice. Carly has just shared a little survey that we would love for you to take to give us some feedback. We were a little adventurous today. We tried a couple of new things. We want to hear how it landed. Should we keep doing it? Or are you like, please stop? We want to hear that, right? We also want to hear your ideas and things that might come up for you that you'd love for us to visit in the future. And we so appreciate this is our chance to co-create with you. So please let us know how you experienced this and collab with us on the link to the survey that Carly shared. Thank you so much, everyone.